Okay, welcome everyone. It looks like we do have a small group today. I can tell you that whenever I send out our email notification, we did get quite a few out of office replies. So I'm guessing a lot of folks are out enjoying their summer, but we do thank you for coming and hopefully being a great and participatory group today. So we appreciate you coming today. We want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us today for another installment of the research webinar series hosted by our team here at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, or MVLRI. The goal of MVLRI is to expand Michigan's capacity for online learning and to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. MVLRI is a division of MVU, or the Michigan Virtual University, a nonprofit organization whose mission is advancing K-12 education through digital learning, research, innovation, policy, and partnerships. MVU is also the parent company of Michigan Virtual School, a supplemental state-sponsored virtual school, Michigan LearnPort, an online professional development portal for K-12 educators and personnel, and MyBlend, a blended learning initiative providing K-12 schools with resources, products, and services to personalize learning options for their students and improve student achievement. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started today, this webinar will be recorded and shared publicly. Consequently, anything shared during this webinar, including chat comments, could be shared publicly. This webinar may represent a presenter's or an attendee's personal views, opinions, conclusions, and other information which do not necessarily reflect those of MVU and or the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute and are not given nor endorsed by MVU/MVLRI unless otherwise specified. Our presenter today is Dr. Beatriz de los Arcos. She is a research associate at the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University. The Open University was founded in the UK in 1969 to open up higher education to all, regardless of circumstances or location. Nearly all OU undergraduate courses have no formal entry requirements, either prior qualifications or experience. As such, it is committed to openness in education in all its forms. For the past 4 years, B has been working on the Hewlett-funded Open Education Research Hub, or OERH, researching the impact of open educational resources on teaching and learning practices and leading the project's collaborations with educational programs in the K-12 sector. Prior to her work with OER Hub, she worked on the production and delivery of online distance language learning courses at the Department of Language. She has also been involved in a range of open education initiatives, including the development, implementation, and evaluation of the LORO repository, which provides OER for language teaching and learning. B has also facilitated the OT12 MOOC and Open Translation Tools and Practices, the first ever MOOC produced at the Open University. With that, I will hand it over to our presenter. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much. Thank you, Justin, for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all. I'm actually talking to you from Ireland, believe it or not. So this is I always have to be grateful actually for the power of technology. So this is great. Um, what so the little research, the piece of research that I'm going to talk to you today. Is a piece of research that I conducted with my colleagues at the Institute of Educational Technology, and it is already published in the Journal of Online Learning Research. So I invite you all to go and have a look at it and read it in more detail. Because what I would like to do today basically is I would like to talk to you about the what's the background to this study, and then I would like to highlight some of the most interesting findings from our point of view. But feel free, since this is not a huge group, so feel free to come in at any point with any questions. I might be able to keep an eye on the chat, but I'll be relying on my wonderful host to actually get things coming in. So honestly, because we is a small group, don't be afraid to actually stop me, or if you have a question in the middle of the presentation, that's fine. This the slides that I'm using are already on SlideShare, so you can. I wrote the link somewhere at the top of the chat, so you can access that later on. or you can simply, just go to SlideShare and search for my name at the OER Hub, and you'll find them there. So we can't. I mean, I can't go. I can't start. Well, I can't go any further really without defining open educational resources. I suppose you're here because you're already somehow familiar with open educational resources, but you still have to start every presentation really with the definition of open educational resources. And the definition that I normally use is the UNESCO definition. So, like, open educational resources, as you can read there, are any type of educational materials that are in the public domain or introduced with an open license. So the idea of the open license is it means that then anyone can copy, can use, can adapt, can reshare all these resources and do so legally and freely. And when we talk about open educational resources, we just don't talk about textbooks, or we just don't talk about images, or just very specific resources, but what we are talking about really is a huge range of resources, from textbooks to curricula, syllabi, notes, assignments, etc., etc., etc. So as Justin said, in the introduction, I work as a researcher for the Open Education Research Hub. So the Open Education Research Hub is a project that is funded by the Hewlett Foundation there in the States. And what we've been doing for the last few years, last 3.5 years, is we've been trying to gather evidence of the impact of using open educational resources in the classroom. So, we really need at these days is very much about showing the evidence that shows the impact. Whether that impact is positive or whether that impact is negative, it's about showing the impact of open educational resources on teaching and learning. So our starting point is that it was a set of hypotheses. So them are the hypotheses that you have there in front of you. I'm really not going to go through all the hypotheses, but it's just to give you an idea for us as a starting point. It was very helpful, because then what we needed to do is just try and find evidence against or for these hypotheses. So hypothesis, for instance, like this idea that when you use open educational resources in the classroom, that helps towards the student performance and student satisfaction, or the idea that if you use open educational resources, what you're doing is actually helping towards widening access to education, or we looked into the financial benefits of using open educational resources. And the best part of our project, I think, was that we did not conduct this research on just by on our own. So it was based, the whole project was based on collaboration. So we've been working with open, not open, we've been working with educational initiatives or educational programs over the world and across sectors. So we worked on with some people in the K-12 sector, but also covering higher education, community colleges in the States, and also informal learning. So within the K-12 sector, we worked in particular with the Flipped Learning Network, with Vital Science, which is a citizen science project for middle school children in Maine. That's a wonderful, wonderful project. So if you get a chance, go and have a look at what they're doing. And Siyavula. So Siyavula is a project. It's based in South Africa, and they are working with open textbooks. So what happened with all these collaborations is each of these collaborations helped us work on maybe one hypothesis, maybe two hypotheses, but what they all had in common. So we worked on different methodologies, but what they all had in common is they all helped us collect data for a big survey of attitudes towards the use of OER, perceptions of the impact of using OER in the classroom, and So we basically wanted to know, we had a big survey out there wanting to know about teachers, formal learners, informal learners. How did they perceive the way they used open educational resources in the classroom, and what they perceived the impact of using open educational in the classroom was, with regard to their own teaching, their own practice, but also with regard to students learning. And so the survey data, some of the surveys are still open. So in a way, we're still collecting data, and it, the the cutting point, I suppose, for this piece of research was at 7,700 responses, and the data also, the raw data is available on Figshare. So if anyone wants to use that data, you're more than welcome to go in and use it for your particular interest, for your particular analysis. So we've got all that data coming from 175 countries. There's lots of information there. So what we've been doing is we've been analyzing the data. We have analyzed the data globally, as in this is what teachers tell us, this is what formal learners tell us, this is what informal learners. We've done the comparisons, but then there's so much there that still that needs to be looked at. The piece of research that I'm talking about here now is like we decided to look at. Okay, let's have a look at K-12 educators. So what happens with school teachers? How do they use open educational resources in the classroom? And what can we learn of the way they're using open educational resources in the classroom? So the exact the sample I'm talking about today is it basically it's 657 responses of from coming from teachers in 72 countries around the world. So you can see some of the, just quickly, the characteristics of the sample we had, that we had more female respondents than male respondents. We had most of our respondents coming from the USA, from the UK, and from South Africa. And in a way, that makes perfect sense to us, because that's where our main collaborations were based. So we basically worked with people in the US and in UK, and also in South Africa. So that's the bulk of the responses come from those three countries. We're talking about teachers who are highly experienced. As you can see, like a majority of them actually have a postgraduate qualification. And we're talking about teachers who are also very experienced in teaching, because again, like a majority had over 10 years of teaching experience. Um, Most of them are employed full time, and most of them again speak English as a native language. And again, in a sense, this actually makes sense as well, since again we go back to the UK, we go back to the US, we go back to South Africa, and the survey that we conducted was always conducted in English. It was never translated into any other language. So anyone responding, answering the questions would have to have a working knowledge of English at least. Um, the subject coverage in general, tends to be always towards kind of STEM subjects. And in the case of K-12 teachers, we have like a majority that you go over 50% told us that they are teaching math, and then education studies was the second highest percentage of teachers. We didn't ask everyone whether they were actually teaching face to face, or whether they were teaching in an online classroom, or whether they were teaching in a blended context. So there was only like a small group, probably just basically half those 657 respondents. What we know, basically, they told us a huge majority of them, so over 85%, are teaching in the face to face, face to face context. So let me see. Right, okay, so this is when the fun begins. So we asked, so one of the easiest questions to answer, right? So one of the first thing we wanted to know about teachers is like, okay, so what types of open educational resources are you using? So first of all, they all, just in case you're wondering, well, how did you know these people knew what open educational resources are? We actually gave them the definition of what is an open educational resource so that everybody will start on the same level. And so then they said, as you can see, the most popular, and so there's a wide variety of resources really. So we're not stuck in just using the one type of resource, but okay, the most popular resources that teachers are using are videos, and then there's images, and then it's in third place what we have is open textbooks. But then again, we think that this idea of this high level of using open textbooks is it comes from our data, from the fact that one of our collaborations in the K-12 sector was CFULA in South Africa, and they especially work with open textbooks. So that's just basically to bear in mind. But the interesting point here is that that's the wide range of resources that teachers are using in the classroom. And we asked them as well, okay, where do you go looking for your resources? If you're looking for a resource to use in the classroom, where do you go? And this is something that we find not only in K-12 educators, but we find that it happens it kind of happens globally. It happens whether you're talking about higher education or whether you're talking about informal learning. Is this idea that everybody knows YouTube, everybody uses YouTube, everybody uses TED Talks, iTunes, and Khan Academy is actually quite high up there. So the most popular, if you actually don't think about Khan Academy, the most popular repositories of educational content are basically repositories which are not necessarily holding open content, as in understood as in material that is released with an open license, so you can actually reuse it, you can adapt it, you can change it, you can redistribute it, and all that. So it's interesting that they are the most popular repositories, and then in contrast, when you have a repository which is one specifically holding content for the K-12 classroom, and specifically holding open educational resources, you see how those repositories are not really they're not really that widely used in comparison with YouTube. But it's not only that they're not used. Is the serious thing, I think, and the interesting thing is that a lot of those repositories like Wiki Connections, CK12, there's a lot of people who are not necessarily aware that these repositories exist. So we'll come back to this point in a minute. But so that's the idea. YouTube is the most popular repository of content. As in, this is the place that all the teachers go to look for the resources, not necessarily open content and not necessarily material specifically for the K-12 classroom. While you have specific repositories for the K-12 classroom and with open content, and they are not really widely used, and in some cases they are not even, people don't even know of their existence. Um, so we wanted to know what teachers do in a repository, in the sense that how active are they? Is it very much about consuming resources, or is it also about contributing resources? And again, this is not surprising, I think. So we have the percentage of teachers that are adding a resource and uploading a resource to a repository. I actually think it's quite high. To be honest, I expected it to be much lower than this. And then again, In terms of adding comments regarding the quality of a resource, or again, adding comments suggesting ways of using a resource, the percentage can goes down. So this is kind of suggesting to us that what teachers are doing. So yes, they're in a way they're kind of more consuming content rather than actively contributing content to all these repositories. And in a way, this is in slight contrast with the idea that when you ask teachers more generally what it is that they use that they do with open educational resources, we find that the percentages of teachers who say they have adapted materials to fit their needs in the classroom is actually quite high. I mean, 85 over 85% of um, of teachers say that they don't actually use the resource as they find it, but they adapt it, right? So now the idea of adaptation is very interesting, and again, I'll come back to this again because it's this idea of what we understood or what we meant by adaptation is not necessarily we reckon it's not necessarily what teachers meant by adaptation. So by adaptation, we meant, okay, you grab a resource and you change it, as in you change it completely. You chop it off and you mix and remix again and come up with a new resource. But that's not exactly what teachers meant, and I'll tell you why in a second. What's surprising, I don't know how surprising you find it actually. I thought that the levels of creating materials would actually be much higher. So they're currently at 38.2%. And then when it comes to actually, yes, I do create a resource, but when it comes to publish it, as in we upload it on the internet and I upload it with an open license. So I'm telling other people how I want them to use my resource. That percentage falls down to 10%, or just over 10%, which I think is very low. So what we're seeing here is this idea. Again, if we're talking about consumers or contributors, you think, okay, so most teachers are going to be consuming open educational resources, and so they're passive in a sense that they just taking stuff from the internet. When it comes to giving back stuff and being more active in contributing to creating content and creating, contributing that content as in having it publicly out there with an open license, then we see that in that case they become much more passive. So going back to the idea of adaptation, was I said to you, okay, what we thought we were asking when we're talking about adaptation is, is this idea of saying, okay, you change something, not drastically, not really that dramatically, but it means that you basically, if you can grab a photograph and you can, just I don't know, see if you have two people in your photograph, you can add balloons or ask the kids in the class to add speech balloons to to create a dialogue between the two characters. As an example, I mean, I could be talking completely, I could be being mad, um, but then see the idea is that so if you think about that the level of adaptation is actually it's massive. It's really big. I think 85% is that's a massive level of adaptation. So we got really excited. We were thinking this definitely needs more research. So if anyone is there looking for a piece of, looking for ideas as in what to research, this is something that needs to be researched, as in what do teachers mean when they actually adapt open educational resources? To what extent is that actual reuse or remix of the content? Because it connects with ideas. And next we asked them, so what do you use open educational resources for, right? And then so we get that the highest percentage, and the highest percentage comes for the idea that most teachers, or a huge percentage of teachers, tell us that they basically use open educational resources because they're looking for new ideas and they're looking for inspiration. So this idea that you have to prepare your class, that you have to prepare for teaching, and you are not quite sure exactly what you know what you have to do, but you're gonna go and access, you go online and you access all these different type of resources to have a look at what other people do, how other people do, how other people teach the same point that you want to teach, and then that's the inspiration that you take. So that's what we think. So that's, if you think about it, how does that connect with adaptation? So the idea that the thing, does it count as adaptation when you actually grab an idea and adapt it to your class? So that's one thing that is actually very, very, very interesting. And the other thing that we found is that third point there in the list, as in, so we're talking about teachers using open educational resources for not as the primary material in the classroom, but very much as just supplementary material, secondary material. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I said I was gonna try and make it interactive. I know I've been speaking for the last 20 minutes. So if I stop here, does anybody have any questions so far?
I think we had some discussion in the chat window about the use of open assessments and whether or not you have any kind of insights around, from your research, any insights around how open assessments may be used or adapted by teachers.
And no, we looked, the closest we got to assessment is actually when we asked about the type of open educational resources they were using, and they told us about quizzes, but not necessarily as in assessment, in the sense that this is the structure that I use for the kind of assessment that I do, but I'm not going to share basically how my students did, or how well they did, or how well the assessment worked. So it's this idea that you share the structure of your assessment and the rationale of the assessment, but and not necessarily the results. They did check quizzes, test exam banks. So yes, I think so. Yeah, I think that's the idea. So, at least it's not so much about, and this is one of the points I want to emphasize towards the end, is that you'll see how it's not. See how your question, you immediately, what your question is, did they share quizzes and test exams banks, right? And they're not. See, that this is the thing, that everybody's looking for the content, but this, as far as I know, is like, where is that exam bank? Where tell me where there's a repository, but because I need to go there and I need to grab all the stuff that I need for my class, whether it is the physical resource or it's just the inspiration or the idea of it. It's just everybody is looking for the resource, but then if you have created that resource, you're not necessarily always putting it online, so it is not there for others to find, basically. I assume most instructors are using this OER through an learning management system. You're absolutely right. It's this idea we asked. We also asked them about sharing, just attitude towards sharing, and everybody's happy to share. As in, if I meet you for coffee, if you're down the corridor, I'm very happy, and we can sit together, and I can share my resources with you. Or here's a paper copy, or we sit down and we talk about it. Everybody's very happy to share via email. If anyone, if they get a request and say, "Would you like to share your resources?" Yes, there you go. This is what I used in my class, and they do share, like, within the walls of the institution, within the walls of the LMS exactly, or call it a VLE or whatever it is. It's just like so that's where the sharing stops. So in a way, it is for the schools to try and have that dialogue with the teachers about the benefits and the limitations as well of actually sharing beyond the let's say the walls of the school, whether they're physical walls or whether they're digital digital walls. Let me see what else we have here. Mm, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let me go on. Let me go on because this is where I find this stuff fascinating. So we talk. So the whole open education research hub is very much about impact. And in the case of the work that we do with the surveys, we're talking about perceptions of impact, right? So it's not really, it hasn't been measured as in cause and effect directly, but it's from within the scope of talking about perceptions. Um, Again, it connects with the idea of adaptation, and it is when we ask them to agree or disagree with a series of statements regarding the impact of open educational resources on their own teaching, and the top percentage basically. So this is the percentage of teachers who either strongly agreed or agreed in the first case that open educational resources allow them to better accommodate diverse learners' needs. And this is, I think, hugely important. And I know, it comes with the flexibility of using open educational resources, and this is something that we found particularly significant in the case of K-12 teachers. So it didn't really happen to this state to such extent when we talked about higher education, what we talked about community colleges. This is very much the K-12 teacher, and I can picture them myself, right? You can picture yourself. You're a teacher. You've got your kids around you, whether it is 20, 30, 15 kids, and your first what you want these kids is you want these kids to learn as best as they can. So, and we go back to the idea that, in this day and age, it's not anymore one size fits all. We know that, right? So, it's the flexibility that open educational resources give us when we want to respond to this idea that we do have a class when we have, all the kids are different, and it's what open educational resources are allowing us to do is this idea that you're not basically trying to mold, you don't change the kit to fit, to match the content, but you can change the content to actually match what the kid in the class needs. And the whole idea is like you open your world, you open, you see, your classroom is not necessarily any longer the four walls of your physical classroom. You connect to the internet and whoops, off you go. There's the whole world at your fingertips in a sense. So it's not really about I teach this way and this is the only way I teach. And in this case, now you can actually go and have a look at how the people teach. And the same curriculum you're teaching, the same point, where is it a grammar point, is it some mathematical equation, whatever. You have a look at how the people are doing it, and that is basically makes you think about your own teaching and how you do things, how you reflect on your own teaching, and then again, how do you help the kids actually to get wherever they want to get. And in a way, there is a very good example. I love this is one of the teachers I spoke to in Minnesota. So apart from the big survey that we did, there was a series of interviews and focus groups. And this is a teacher teaches math, right? And it's exactly this idea of impact, as in, he's saying, right, this is the way I used to prepare my classroom, right? I used to have one textbook, and so that was one perspective, one point of view. But now I can go online, I can watch a video, I can look at somebody else's materials, what it is that they're doing. So then what I'm going to do is to modify what it is that what I had prepared, or bring this into the classroom in some way. So it allow my students to get multiple perspectives on a topic, right? And this is what he says. I guess everything that's out there online allows me to be a better teacher. And it's again, we're exposed to so much more than just basically having just the one little textbook in your own little into the into your little big classroom. And we asked them as well about the use of, so what again is all about perception. So how did they perceive the impact on learning? So how did they perceive the impact of them, the teachers using open educational resources? How did that affect the kids learning, right? And so it wasn't really necessarily about improving test scores, but it was the gains. It's more to do with helping the kids develop their independence and self-reliance, and helping the kids I'm not gonna say exactly have a better time, have a good time in the class, but it's like enjoy that learning experience, and also engage the students so that they're able to engage better with the subject that they are studying. And one of them, um, again, this is another teacher who teaches statistics, and the good thing, what I find, what I love his example, because I mean, I never studied. I was very bad at math in school when I was when I was a kid, and I think if I was in his class, I probably would have been much happier. The what I find extraordinary about what this teacher does in the class is that there's no textbook in his class, right? All his content is online, and he the first thing he does is that he explains to the kids in his class what's the difference between having a textbook and having and having the material online, between what's the difference between copyright and actually an open license. And he says to the kids, you know what, if we have a book and it's copyrighted, we can't touch it, we can't change it, we can't do anything with it. While if we have the content online and published under an open license, then anyone can contribute to it, anyone can make it better. So this idea, the curriculum is not it's not my curriculum, but it actually belongs to the class and it belongs to the world. So one of the things that he does every year is, as part of the assessment, there's an assignment that what the kids need to do is they have to actually improve the content of the course. So it's something, but it's just not improving the course just for the sake of improving the course. What they need to do is actually justify why the course needs to get better. So it's this idea, he has the kids asking questions, thinking critically about how they learn, how the curriculum works. They need to show him the evidence that their concerns are valid, right? So what he's doing is that they're doing all this and critical thinking about the content of the course, which is, as he says, it's something the kids are, they're never asked to do, hardly ever asked to do this, so it's okay, so let's work together. As in, your relationship in the class is actually comes down, it's not about coming down, but it's at the same level as the kids. It's like, okay, let's work together on this content, and we can actually change it because we have it under the, it's openly licensed, so we can change it, we can change it together. But it's not about just changing it for the sake of changing it, but it's about, you think about it and explain to me why this needs to be changed, and then we can actually change it, and we can improve it. What age they were? They were in middle school, I think. I can't remember exactly how old they were, but I think this is the teacher's name is Andy, and I think he actually teaches in middle school, but I'm not 100% sure. But you could. This is something that you can, I think it would work obviously at different levels, but I think it actually works with younger kids and older kids as well. Obviously, the elder kids, the older kids would actually maybe be more conscientious, but you know, so. So the impact, when you're seeing the impact of using open educational resources in the classroom, whether it is on teaching or it is on the students learning, it's actually working. It's actually quite positive. But think about it. And this is what I find, in a way, I'm not 100% sure what to think about this, right? So we ask them about challenges. So, I mean, we know that at this stage, the use of open educational resources in the classroom is not necessarily mainstream. So why? What is stopping people from actually using open educational resources in their classroom? And if we start at the very bottom, right? So the last point is like, so these were the five, one, two, three, four, five, yeah, the five most popular answers, let's say. So the last one makes sense. So overcoming technology problems when downloading resources. This is, think about it. This is something that appeals more, or that would happen more. The story. So our teachers were coming um, from the four corners of the world. So what you have here is like somebody, if you access to the internet is actually not very reliable, then of course you're going to struggle when it comes to downloading resources. So maybe this is a challenge that applies more to developing countries more than the developed world. But if you look at the other ones, it's all related to finding resources. Okay, so it's about knowing where to find resources. It's about finding resources that are, that it in my subject area, and it's about finding resources that are of sufficient high quality. Um, the issue of quality, I think, is contentious enough because what is quality exactly? In a sense, like you might think that what you have is not is of no use to somebody else. You don't think it is of actually quality, but then I can find quality in it because I want to use it for a different purpose. Um, not having enough time to look for suitable resources. Oh well, exactly. Teachers, we're busy people, and of course, you need like 28 hours in a day. I can't really, I don't have any argument against that, in the sense that yes, I fully support the idea that we should have more time to actually prepare the class and have the support of whoever needs to support us in that way. But for the other thing, this is what really kind of surprises me, in the sense that um, on the one side, people need they want the place to go and look for the resource. It's like that's the most important thing. I wish there was a place where I could go and find resources that were of good quality, that were exactly relevant in my subject area. So actually, the funny thing is that those places exist. You have repositories like the CK12 Foundation. You have repositories that connections. You have repositories as Merla. So, but still, people are not finding the resources. Um, and so, whose fault is that? Is it the repository's fault? Is it what do we need really to raise that the level of awareness? As in, yes, of course, in some cases, the repository is there, the place where you're gonna find the resources is there, but it's just basically not aware of it. But the thing really, that's I think what I'm gonna um, um stop talking, because I've been talking too much probably. Think about it. So we have it. So the biggest challenges are related to finding resources. Okay, so it's all related to finding the resource. Where do I go? How can I find? Oh, please give me the resource that I need, right? there was there was a I was on Twitter like a few weeks ago, and somebody said, and this is somebody I don't know. I was just, it comes on your Twitter stream and you don't really know who this person is, but it was the person that there was a person who said, well, do you know what? I often go and I Google and I go online to try and look for the resource that I need for my teaching, and I can't find it, right? So what do? Well, I created the resource because I still need it for my class. And once I create it, I put it online. So I upload it online. I share it online for others to find, right? And I think this is very much where we are failing in a sense that, and I go back to this idea of being a consumer or being a contributor. It's just very much I know that as teachers we create and we are amazing individuals, as in, this is, come on, we are teaching, right? And but what we're failing ourselves in the sense that, we expect too much, as in, give me what I need, and if I don't find it, that's what we need to do. It's all about sharing in a sense that, you haven't found it, well, then you're gonna have to create it yourself, put it back out there, and for others to use. And this is the important thing, that this is what we need to get into the habit. I think teachers are much more open than what they think they are in their own practices. But this idea is that we have to try and help them understand and deal with the problems, the challenges they might find when it actually comes to sharing, and not just sharing in your school, not just sharing with your colleagues or, down the corridor, but actually sharing openly online for everyone. This is where I'm gonna stop. Sorry, I get excited, and I could be talking about this for ages. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy, and if we have time, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, we certainly have time for questions, so if anyone does have a question that you'd like to pose in the chat window, or if you'd like to jump on your own microphone, feel free to raise your hand. I'd be happy to grant you mic rights. I do have kind of a kind of a general question. I'm wondering, like, if anywhere in the data you may have discovered or like heard of teachers who were concerned with kind of a lack of quality when it comes to OER. I know, like, I'm going to post an article here in the chat window from like a grant-funded project that our state did to produce open textbooks, and that was kind of like an open source idea where educators kind of contributed to this, what became an edited textbook, and it actually got kind of some bad reviews, I guess you would say, from some educators and experts in terms of some just errors, factual, grammatical as well. But I'm wondering if you heard from anyone in the data of folks kind of expressing concerns around quality when it comes to OER.
We have, so you're absolutely right. In a way, people. So if you need something you need a particular, so you're teaching a particular something in your class tomorrow or next week, and you go online searching for stuff, and you say, you're gonna say, oh, you have to use your good judgment and say this is good or this is bad. So yes, we do have comments, as in, we do this in a certain amount of open comments, as in, where people say, actually, I don't use open educational resources because open educational resources are not good, right? And we haven't really got a chance to go back to those people to actually talk to them and say, okay, explain to me exactly where you're coming from, because the idea is that, the issue of quality is, it's just so difficult, really. And the one thing about open educational resources is that, the good thing, an open educational resource, if you find that it's, in your case, it's not accurate, or there's some mistakes, then it's actually very easy to correct. That's what makes it open. The fact that we can actually improve on it all the time. So it's not static, it's not stable, but you can actually work on it and make it better. that's what I'm saying from my own point of view, as in quality is very much in the eye of the beholder. If and I go back to the idea of adaptation, you grab something, you're never gonna find, or very seldom you're gonna find the perfect resource that you can use in your class as is, right? But and then even if that existed, you're always gonna add your own style, or you're gonna localize it to your particular context. So that's what makes for me the issue of quality, as in, yes, it is difficult to talk about quality, but think about it as in the fact that the resource is open is the same thing as talking about, this resource actually is open, then it can be improved. Then, what you think is not good quality, it can always be better quality. See what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I think, someone who does so much work around OER and the organization that you work with, I think you probably have very different perspectives from, kind of this entrenched idea around what textbooks or resources should be. So I like that perspective and that balance as well. And thank you, Brandon, for pointing to that resource. That's really helpful. Got probably another. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to say that we have probably another minute or two for questions. So if anyone has a question, please feel free.
Oh, you had a question. Okay, let me see what it's going to. Right, okay. So this is a question about data sets. So in the type of OER used by teachers, the last category was data sets. What does that entail? There's a whole, I don't know whether to call it a movement or what to call it. There's a whole, yeah, let's call it a movement. So there's a number of teachers. It's actually a wonderful little book on case studies. I'll dig for the link and I'll find it. It's just how do you use data sets, as in real data, real live open data that's available to anyone to use in the classroom. So I know there was, for instance, somebody working on the bus routes, for instance, and what the stops were, and how many people got on the bus, and how long it took the bus to go from B to C, right? And so it's just and they were using that data to teach some mathematical concept. Don't ask me exactly what. It's very much about that, as in use it data sets. Think about data sets that already exist. For instance, the World Bank data have a lot of data on different countries around the world, on literacy rates, on, so you could actually, it's about how to be creative with that data. So you're actually teaching your kids in a classroom to do real analysis, or to do real stuff using real data at the same time. Yep, that's it's just looking at the content from Brandon, the rubrics from Achieve. Yeah, they are actually they're very very good. These are the people also involved in the K12 collaborative. So if you haven't checked what they're doing, by all means have a look, because it's very very good work.
Okay, well, I think in the interest of time, we should probably go ahead and start wrapping up. I want to thank our attendees today for coming and being so participatory. I really want to thank B. B, if you wanted to go ahead and wrap up, feel free.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. If anyone wants to chat about anything, or if anyone wants to follow up on anything, do drop me a line. Or there's my email, or there's my Twitter handle, or even the hubs, the OER hub. So we're always happy to share, and we're always happy to find out more about what people are doing, and always happy to collaborate anywhere and everywhere. So by all means, if and you know what, the most important thing is that if you're talking about K-12, we have a huge responsibility, because our kids then they get older, and they go into, maybe they go into university. So it's for us now really to teach them about open licenses, and about open content, and about it's part of the digital education, the digital literacy. So this is hugely important so that we prepare them to actually go out into the big bad world. So yeah, thanks for having me. Get in touch if you need anything. I'll be very happy to continue the conversation and start new conversations, or whatever.
Great. Well, thank you again so much. Just a couple things here before we wrap up. I want to make sure that we share a poll, or actually a couple polls that we pose to our attendees of webinars. So I will open these up. I'll go ahead and move these over to the side, actually. And then we will go ahead and wrap up with just a couple items here. We did want to make sure that we mention a couple of our ongoing initiatives. We have a virtual Viewpoints podcast, which you can check out by clicking the link there. We invite folks from many different areas, including research, government practice, some other kind of areas, people working in schools, or different grant initiatives, to come on and talk about how some research influences their work around K-12 online and blended learning. So you can check out the podcast there. You can also find it in iTunes and the Google Play Store. We also have a guest blogger program. So if you're interested in writing for us, if you'd like to share some of your own research or some of your own work through our blogging platform, please feel free to check out that link there to learn more about our guest blogger program. And then we have some upcoming webinars in the month of July. We do have our Summer Research Collaborative meeting, where we invite researchers in the field of K-12 and online blended learning to come and talk about their own research, maybe research in progress, to get some feedback on their own ideas, talk about different opportunities in terms of publishing opportunities or grant opportunities as well. So that'll be held July 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then the following week, July 27th, we'll be hearing from some more authors of another article published in JOLR on teachers using designerly thinking in K-12 online courses. That'll be at the same time, July 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. For more information, you can visit our website, mvlri.org/presentations/webinars. And then in the meantime, feel free to keep up with us. You can email us, provide us with any feedback for all of our platforms, including our webinar series and other things, at mvlri@mivu.org. You can sign up for our mailing list by clicking the link there. You can also follow us on social media. Our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn handles are all listed as well. And then we'll be posting the recording of this session on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/MVLRI1, where you can find all of the archived recordings of all of our webinar sessions. And again, check out our website to see all of our upcoming webinars as well. With that, I hope everyone has a great Wednesday. Take care.